Hello, YouTube. I'm your daily trader, Ben, and today we're going to be talking about the three most powerful daily cycle variants, in my opinion. Now, there are more than just three daily cycle variants. However, these are just the only three variants that I use on a daily basis. If anything, you should want to simplify your trading as much as possible and not try to be looking for a million different things, because if you are, that's only going to confuse your psychology and at the end of the day cause you to take or overtrade, cause you to have FOMO, and pretty much over analyzing is the reason why a lot of people actually fail in trading. Now, I do want to break this down very simply. I want to go over the session timings. Then I want to hop into the Judas swing, which is discovered by ICT, and or at least we think ICT is the one that discovered it. We're also going to go over the Asian break and retest, and we're also going to go over the Asian whipsaw. Again, these are the three most powerful variants, in my opinion. I know other people might use other variants as well. These concepts are really not that difficult. And at the end of the video, we are going to go into hindsight to basically show you guys how these trade in a live setting. Without any further ado, let's get right into the video. So, session timings, right? As we all know, we always start with the Asian session, right? And I want to break this down. Where's my little line here? Into three little subcategories, right? We have the Asian session, we have Frankfurt, we have London, we have this little tiny dead zone in between, right? And then New York. I'm not going to mark in the dead zone only because I'm not really a huge fan of it, right? Generally, we have these four areas that we're looking at, right? Rarely we're ever going to trade Asia. However, a lot of my students know that I am a big fan of Asia. And the reason that I love Asia is actually because it is the very beginning of the algo for the most part. In short, the first thing or the first area in which Asia grabs liquidity generally generates the first move, of the day. And sometimes that move becomes the overall move for the remainder of, all four sessions or all three sessions for the most part. I said four because I was including Frankfurt, but what I mean by three sessions is the main three, right? Like Asia, London, and New York. Anyways, let's get into the session timings, right? At first over here, we have the Asia session, right? Basically, Asia session for me, oh, whoops, I don't know why that happened. Asian session timings for me are 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. New York Eastern time. 7 p.m. is when the Sydney Open opens over here in New York. However, the kill zone for Asia is actually very different from 7 to 10 p.m., right? So we're going to write down 7 to 10 p.m. New York Eastern time to understand that that is the entirety of the Asian session. However, the Asian kill zone, right, Asia KZ, is actually 8 to 10 p.m. Why is that? The 7 to 8 marker is really the pre-market. A lot of the time, there are going to be a lot of false moves during 7 to 8 p.m. during that session opening. So I would try and refrain from trading that designated time of the session. Right now, the next part over here, we now have Frankfurt, which I'm going to call FF. Right, let's make that a little bit smaller. So what are the Frankfurt times? So the Frankfurt times are actually very simple. Right, so Frankfurt is supposedly 2 a.m., right, to 3 a.m. New York Eastern time. However, the kill zone that I trade is actually 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. New York East. People are probably wondering why that is. I actually do not know. However, I just do find a lot of success trading that extra hour before. For anyone that was wondering or curious, I used to stay up all night trading until I worked up enough capital to pretty much trade the New York session alone. Anyways, these are the timings that I pretty much use for Frankfurt. I'm going to write down Frankfurt KZ right here. All right, the next session, as we know, is London. All right, London, I'm just going to go ahead and put in the kill zone. It's actually very simple. We're looking at 3 a.m. to 5:30 a.m. New York Eastern time. All right. Now, there are magic minute mitigations within the London session as well as the New York times. I'm saying magic minute mitigations because I feel everyone is very familiar with liquidity inducement theorem and, how they describe how during certain session openings, there are specific mitigations that are seen or believed to be, more effective, right? Generally, that is 3:30 a.m. New York Eastern time, because that is one of the openings of the London markets, right? So this is where a lot of volume is going to kick in. It's actually very similar to the 9:30 a.m. New York stock open, and we're about to get there in a second. I'm just going to write down MMM for magic minute mitigations. Now we also have New York session, right? New York, you can start trading at 7 a.m. New York East. However, the correct kill zone is really 8 a.m. right to 11:30 a.m. New York East, or at least that is the kill zone that I trade for New York. So New York really is the largest session. Now, in terms of volume, the majority of the time, London is where we're going to find the main move, right? Frankfurt is where we're going to find the manipulation of the main move. And the New York session is usually used for continuations of London and or reversals, right? So those three characteristics are the most simple and easy to understand characteristics for each session, right? We don't really want to get into Asia. It's just going to be super confusing. If anything, I'm just going to make a whole nother video on the Asian session, because a lot of the time the Asian session is primarily used as liquidity. Anyways, now that we have the session timings down, let's go over the daily cycle variance and my favorite ones associated with them, right? Now, I did make another video on the daily cycle. However, I just wanted to get a little bit more specific into each individual variant, right? Starting off with the Judas swing, right? As a lot of people know, the Asian session is usually buildup, right? A liquidity buildup. Now, the first thing we want to identify in that liquidity buildup is a trend line, right? Whether that trend line is upwards trending or downwards trending, right? We need to understand that whether it's uptrending or downtrending, that is what is going to cause the inducement buys or sells. Let me rephrase that and let me show you, because I know it can get a little bit confusing. Say we are in an upwards trend in the Asian session. That means we are inducing buying in the Asian session, meaning a lot of breakout traders, right, are going to be looking to hit buy stop orders right here, right? As soon as these buy stop orders are triggered, what is going to happen, right? What's going to happen is the market's going to come up, trigger these buy stop orders. Frankfurt is going to be that manipulation of the main move, right? And it's actually going to go the opposite direction, or at least start going the opposite direction, right? Now, what's going to happen during London? There's two things that are going to happen, right? Either London's going to go up, test the Frankfurt highs, and then continue that main move, and or London's going to sweep the Frankfurt highs just one more time, right? Have another confirmation pattern and then make the main move, right? The biggest thing to understand about the Judas swing is that wherever Frankfurt and London kick, right, whether it's the upside or the downside here, that is where London is going to sustain its run, right? So we kicked to the upside here, and now Frankfurt and London has sustained to the downside, right? The same thing goes the opposite direction, right? Say, let me just clear out this like so. Say the liquidity was building downwards, right? And there was a downtrend, right? That means we were what? Inducing selling along this trend line. We have now just triggered sell stop orders. So a bunch of sellers are now entering into the market. Same thing applies, right? We get to London. London, there's two options. We come and mitigate this extreme right here and we go higher, and or we're going to take out the Frankfurt lows and then continue higher, right? So now that we have an understanding of what goes on during the Judas swing for both Frankfurt and London, what are the characteristics for New York? The majority of the time for the Judas swing, New York is going to be a reversal. Now, there are certain scenarios in which New York does imply continuations. However, it's very rare. Let me show you what I mean. The same thing, just like what happened with Frankfurt and London, New York, a lot of the time, can come up, swipe London highs before reversing, and or New York will just come down a little bit, come back up, test the London highs, then continue back down. Right now, in the continuation, for continuations, right, generally speaking, this whole area that Frankfurt and London created can become an extreme, right? Because there was some sort of liquidity buildup over here. And what can happen is New York will come back down, mitigate this, and then run. And an added tool that you can use in your analysis is from this low, London low, to the London high. You can take your fib tool, low to high, and kind of find price hit that 71, 78 area, right? That's generally a very powerful area for SMC traders, especially when the market is looking like so. With that being said, hopefully you guys now have a better understanding of what the Judas swing is. Now we're going to move on to the Asian break and retest. And the Asian break and retest, it doesn't happen often, but when it does, we have to know when to take action. So how does the Asian break and retest work? Right. Well, the Asian break and retest is actually fairly simple, right? Similar as before, right? We have to understand where the trend line is coming from. Let's say that the trend is moving up in the Asian session, right? So we know that we are going to come trigger Frankfurt buy stop orders. Right? What are we now looking for price to do in terms of the Asian break and retest? Well, what we need is for London to basically take price back down close to the Asian midline. We can simply just induce the Asian midline like so. Sell stop orders get triggered at that midline. And what happens? London continues the move back up. Now, again, what happens during New York? It's actually the exact same thing, or at least very similar to how the Judas swing pretty much plays out, right? With that being said, we're generally going to see the stop hunts of these highs, or we will see New York come down, retest those highs, and then continue lower. On top of that, right, New York can also be a continuation, right? Now, what I mean by that is this whole area now, similar to the Judas swing, now becomes that OB, right? So we can now use the Frankfurt London highs and lows as an area to actually find continuations. Now, if you want to know how to have a little bit more of a better entry criteria, definitely look into how I trade smart money traps. Anybody that knows how I trade knows that I trade the same exact pattern every time where we sweep, have a change of character, mitigation, and then generally price just runs, or I play the complete opposite and take the sell side. Right. But if you want to learn more about that, just click into all the other videos that I have posted on this channel. I really do have a plethora of free content that you can learn from. Anyways, let's get right back into the variance, right? Hopefully that gave you guys a little bit better of an understanding. I do want to get into hindsight here in a little bit to show you all these variants on the charts and not just diagrams. However, I know that diagrams really help people understand all the concepts pretty much from a conceptual perspective. Now let's move on to the Asian whipsaw, right? Now it's exactly what you might think it is. Maybe some people already have an idea or know what it is. Same thing as always, we need to see the Asian liquidity buildup. We need to see Frankfurt make that manipulative move either to the downside or the upside. Now, what makes this move a little bit different, and I apologize about my dog. She doesn't mind over there. Anyways, I apologize for that. Someone came to my front door and that just completely ruined the recording. But anyways, to get right back into it, Asian whipsaw, right? We take out Frankfurt lows here. We trigger a bunch of sell stop orders. And then what happens, right? We want to see London take price all the way back up and now trigger the buy stop orders, right? So sell stop orders have now been triggered. Buy stop orders have now been triggered. Now there's two things that are pretty much going to happen in this scenario now. Right? Either London is going to come back down, retest the Frankfurt lows, and pop off, right? Or London is simply going to take out the highs or retest its own highs and shoot all the way back down and take out these lows. Once we take out these lows, what can happen? All right, well, let's pretend that this was the OB. And now all of this area is imbalance in the market, right? Simply, New York could do one of two things now. You can now chop and just continue lower, and we're simply not going to get a trade. Or New York can come all the way back into this imbalance, have a nice reaction and run. Or the highest probability scenario, is if New York comes all the way back up, builds a little bit of liquidity, maybe has some price cycle inducement, one sweep, two sweep, maybe that third sweep up here, mitigation, then we have some confirmation, price will continue to run back to the downside, right? So hopefully with all these diagrams, we now have a little bit more of a better understanding of the three most powerful daily cycle variants from my perspective. Let's go into the live charts here. Let's look at some examples. All right. Now I do use, let me put up my session breaks because it does help me view the days. I do use this indicator right here to help me understand Asian liquidity in terms of my, I did not mean to bring that up. In terms of my session timings, all right, if we come in here, I have 18 to 1, right? So that is what I use for Asia. Let's go ahead and pop on that indicator, right? And let's see what type of variance we can find, right? Now, already I can find a variant in every single one of these plays right here, right? Right away, what do we see? Right, we see the Asian break and retest. Let's bring up the timings. Right here is, right here, Frankfurt, right? Frankfurt runs all the way to here, actually. So let me go ahead and get rid of this, right? Then we have London right here. Let me get my timing, right? And then here's the dead zone. And then New York starts here, ends generally around here. All right. What happens, right? Frankfurt comes and manipulates to the downside, right? What does London do? London comes and takes out Frankfurt one more time, all right? Clears these lows, takes price all the way back up to what? Hit Asia. And as we know, Asia can be used as this giant OB for the most part, right? I know I mentioned earlier that we should come induce this midline. That generally is higher probability, but simply the lows of Asia, the midline of Asia, and the highs of Asia are all areas in which we can induce, right? In this case, we have induced the Asian lows, right? And then what does London do? It comes and takes out Frankfurt highs, right? And then, well, in this case, kind of, but technically we take out Frankfurt highs right here, and then London sustains its move. And then what does New York do later? It comes all the way back up and continues. Now, I don't know if I would have found a nice continuation trade in New York today. However, the main move, as we know, came from London on that Asian break and retest. And that's why it's called an Asian break and retest, is because the Asia session is generally used as a giant OB, right? Now let's come over here, see what other type of variant that we can find, right? Now I can already see why this has worked. And I'm going to go ahead and add in a couple other tools here to help you guys identify what's going on the previous day, right? Now, yes, this all is in hindsight. I understand that, but it's the only way I can explain the logic in a quicker manner. I don't want this video running to like 30, 45 minutes long. I do tend to ramble on, and I apologize. Anyways, here's this extreme down here, right? We can see what has happened. Frankfurt has kicked the lows. So all of the sell stop orders have been triggered right here, right? What did we come mitigate? What helped me understand that this was going to go higher? Let's look back another day, right? And see that we had this OB here. A lot of people are probably recognizing this OB. First of all, this is not what makes the OB valid. What allows the OB to be a little bit more valid is all this imbalance that's resting in here. And we can actually bring up the here and use this as inducement, right? So what happens is Frankfurt kicks the lows. In combination with all this imbalance here, right, we can also use the previous Asian session to determine direction, right? What happened? We had a nice break of the Asian session the previous day, right, which validates, in reality, all of this area down here to be used as an OB. I'm just refining to this point here into the next day to now use the daily cycle to help me pretty much catch this move. I really hope that makes sense. Anyways, Frankfurt kicks to the low, sell stop orders get triggered, and we have a nice judas swing, right? Now this judas swing, as we can see, here's that trend line coming into the downside, right? Or that channel coming into the downside. Sell stop orders get triggered. We come all the way back up to New York. New York decides to make a continuation on, remember that Frankfurt lows right here, and that's why we could have had more orders in during New York here, and we rock it. Funny enough, Asia, a lot of the time, will take out previous day highs, trap traders, and then go the opposite direction. Hopefully that makes sense. Now let's go over one more variant. Let's see if we can find the Asian whipsaw, and already I found it. So here we are with the Asian whipsaw, and like I said before, this one just plays out perfectly, just like the diagram, right? Here we have Frankfurt coming to the lows. As you can see right here, London literally opens right at 3 here, takes out all these orders, mitigates this extreme. London comes all the way back down, takes out Frankfurt lows. We come and then retest London highs one more time, and that is how you trade the Asian break and retest, right? I really encourage all of you guys to go back in hindsight and try and find as many variants as you can. As you can see, here's another Asian whipsaw. Here's another Judas swing, right? This one I don't like at all. Sometimes there isn't going to necessarily be a variant. This one has no variant. Here's a nice little Judas swing, as we can see, pop to the highs, come here, retest, continue, right? And as you can see, if you understand the confluence or how the Asian session truly works, right, it's going to give a lot more confluence to your trading. Anyways, I hope you guys learned something new today. I know this video ran a little bit long, but for anyone that stayed to the end, I really hope you guys learned something new. If you did, please drop a big fat thumbs up on this video. It helps us out a ton. Give this channel a sub. And yeah, thank you guys. I'll see you in the next video.